Můžeme, jo? Můžeme. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Zantowski. I'm the executive director of the Václav Havel Library in Prague, and it is my honor and pleasure to chair this panel on globalization and identity crisis, the breeding ground for populism. I will start with making just maybe a couple of controversial remarks, as usual. The causal chain between globalization, identity crisis, nationalism, xenophobia, populism, and decreasing trust in democratic institutions and political parties, as implied by the annotation for the panel, seems to me rather simplistic. It is undoubtedly true that the present crisis of democracy coincides with the acceleration of the globalization process. But that does not necessarily mean that globalization is to be blamed for everything. And in particular, what I miss in this scheme is some degree of self-reflection and introspection about how much we in the democratic societies and those of us who believe in the democratic process and are involved in the democratic process, whether as politicians or as academics or as civil society activists, are co-responsible for this unfortunate recent trend. I would like the four preeminently qualified panelists on my panel, and my only regret is that we have no women on the panel, but we'll have to make up for it the next time. That's not fair. I would like them to address, if possible, at least one of the following questions. First, is conflict an unavoidable part of globalization? And if not, can it be avoided and how? Second, what are the causes of identity crisis? Is it the intrusion by the outside world, the globalized world? Or is it the loss of local perspective? Is it the technological progress? Is it the short-sightedness of politicians? We sometimes, influenced by the media and by political discussions, seem to believe that most people today, at least in the developed societies, live in a globalized world. But I would argue this is not quite the case. There is a minority of people, mostly extremely qualified people, who do live in a globalized world and have they, as I sometimes say, have they breakfast in Hong Kong on sushi, and they lunch in London, and they dinner in New York. But in terms of numbers, they represent still a very small section of the society. Most people, at least in this country and in some other countries I know of, still live in a local world. Their preeminent worry is not about Ebola or global warming or even the migration crisis, but about how to get a bus from their hometown to the next town, how to attend to the needs of their school children, and so on and so forth. And sometimes it seems to me that this is creating tension between the voters and the electorates and the political representations who inevitably are drawn to the global phenomena. The third question that Václav Havel had been asking and would still be asking if he were alive is, are we witnessing an emergence of a global civilization? He very much hoped to see that happening. Or are we witnessing a clash of civilization, as Samuel Huntington feared? I mean, mind you, because this is often a misinterpretation. I mean, Huntington did not believe in the clash of civilizations. He feared the clash of civilizations, and in his book he discussed some of the ways a clash of civilization could be avoided. And last, brings me back to my initial opening, is the crisis of the democratic system a result of the globalization process, or is it a consequence of decay caused by unresolved issues? And some of the latest works by Francis Fukuyama on the origins of social order and political system is a source of a lot of material on this question. So with this, I would turn to the panel, and I would ask Roberto Stefan Fua, who's the lecturer in political science at the University of Melbourne in Australia, to make his opening remarks. Please.
Great. Thank you, Michael, for that introduction. So I sort of understand three questions. The first question is globalization contributing to the rise of populism? The second question is, if globalization is contributing to populism, then how is it doing so? And then the third question, of course, the question we all care about is what do we do? What is the response to that? And I think the answer to the first question is very simple. I think it's a yes. I think globalization has contributed to the rise of populism. How has it done so? I think there's really two mechanisms that I would identify. First of all, I think globalization has created new economic divisions in society, in particular between cosmopolitan urban centers like London or New York or Berlin or perhaps even Prague as well, that are connected to the global economy and that are competitive in new sectors like finance, technology, education, media, tourism. And as a result, people are doing very, very well in these few cosmopolitan centers. But while people in London or New York have been getting ahead, many people in the rest of the country are really struggling just to get by. And in vast swathes of our societies, in the American Midwest, in Northern England, in Eastern Germany, people feel left behind because they have been left behind. And people feel invisible because in a very real sense, they are. Secondly, I think globalization has created a social class divide, and it's obviously something that is related to the economic divide, in that it's something you notice particularly in developing societies, but it's true across the world, that you have a very small minority who, as you point out, can have breakfast in Hong Kong and lunch in London and dinner in New York. A minority in society that is English-speaking, that has studied at elite universities in Europe or North America, and whatever its superficial diversity, it's an elite that is actually quite homogeneous on social and economic policy issues, such that when the average man or woman on the street switches on the TV and they look at politicians, the political class, when they look at public intellectuals, when they look at people like myself. What they see is a group of people who don't necessarily think in the same terms that they do, and perhaps just as importantly, don't talk in the same language that they do. And that's, I think, a really, really major problem for any democracy, because ultimately, on some fundamental level, if people don't feel like you care, they won't care what you say. So this has created a really fertile breeding ground for a new form of populism. And I don't think that this is a passing wave. I don't think it's just something that happened in 2016. I don't think that we are past the high point of populism. I believe that this divide will affect politics in Western societies for at least a generation. So the key question is, for those who care about democracy and liberal democracy, what is the appropriate response to this new political cleavage? And I think there's really sort of two thoughts that I hear in discussions with people over the last months and over the last year. The first suggestion is that if we are entering a new populist era, we'll divide nationalists against the defenders, if you will, of globalization or cosmopolitan liberalism, then the solution to the problem of left-wing populism and right-wing populism is to try and create a sort of populism of the center. And that sounds like a kind of crazy idea. But if you look at figures like Macron in France, or indeed Barack Obama when he was running to become president of the United States, they do provide examples of outsider candidates who mobilized based on movement politics outside or quasi-outside of existing political party hierarchies. They had a kind of celebrity politics aspect to them, and they were very, very successful in reaching out to people through the new social media. So there is a possibility for a kind of centrist platform to function in a populist age and to win elections. So that can work. There are obviously many, many problems, foremost among them being that movement politics tends not to survive very well beyond the individual politician who has been the center of that movement. But they provide examples that it can work. And the second suggestion, which is perhaps a little bit more pessimistic, is that we're just going to have to place our faith in a process of democratic learning. That is to say that maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but over the course of a decade, over the course of 20 years' time, people will learn from the failures of populism. And people will see they will see the examples that have not worked. So just in the same way that in Latin America, everyone can look at Venezuela today, and nobody takes Venezuela anymore as a model. And eventually, people will learn in the same way from the rise of populism. In Southern Europe, people can see what has happened in Greece, and they can see that Syriza and Tsipras do not provide a model for dealing with the Eurozone crisis. Placing our faith in democratic learning is perhaps a little bit more pessimistic. It will take a little bit more time, and it unfortunately means that we may have to tolerate a kind of politics that is a little bit less liberal, but potentially a little bit more democratic.
Thank you very much, Roberto. And I have a few questions in mind, but I will wait for the end of the introductory round. I would now turn to Jon Gnarr. Jon Gnarr is a character with a varied career, which is the way I like them. And he was an actor, a comedian, a politician, the mayor of Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland. He was a founder of the Best Party. I'm not sure whether it was the best party, but it was called the Best Party. And that's a first too. And he's remained, after retiring from politics, he's remained an activist and writer and involved in social affairs. So, Jon.
Yeah. Thank you. I would like to start by saying how glad I am to get to be here with you and discuss these things. And wonderful to be in beautiful Prague. And I plan to do my own private Jaroslav Hasek tour tonight. But then there was also a football match. Iceland has to win Kosovo tonight, and we will do that, of course. And there are many things, thoughts, globalization, and from my point of view as somebody who has, for the most part of his life, lived in a place like Iceland, globalization completely turned my country upside down. And maybe most drastically in 2008, when our financial institutions completely collapsed, directly because of globalization, and I've given it a lot of thought because globalization has good sides and it has some bad sides and opportunities, but also problems. And like now today, Iceland has become very trendy. It's a popular destination for tourists. In a country with a population of 340,000 people, and we have now over 2 million tourists. And of course, the tourism saved the economy. Everybody's working in tourism now. Everybody used to work in the banking sector before, but now everybody is working in tourism. Many of my friends who are artists are now guides. They have turned away from acting because acting doesn't pay as well as being a guide. And it's amazing. Everybody is a guide. And people have been asking me in terms of tourism, like, is it bad or is it good? Is it good or bad, tourism? It must be tiring for you, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it can be, but it's also the thing that helped rebuild our economy. So it has good sides and bad sides. And for me, most of my life I worked as an artist. I'm a writer. I write books and I write scripts for television shows, and I'm also an actor, so I play in my own television shows. I've considered myself to be political, but in theory, I've been interested in political philosophy and political theories, and not so much in contemporary politics. It's it has bored me, not interesting. It's not how I perceived politics, like they were done. They were supposed to be done differently. But after the crisis in 2008, I entered into politics, and it got me thinking, maybe more regular people, not professional politicians, should get involved in politics. And I started my own political party, and I ran for the elections in 2010. And it was, my platform was populist. It was what I call positive populism. I promised people whatever. because one of my main promises was that I would break all my promises anyway, as is tradition in politics. So I can promise you whatever you want me to promise you. And you know, get away with all debt, that's a promise. Vote for me and, you know, I'll get away with all your debt. And I was elected. And I stayed in office for a whole term. I was the mayor of Reykjavik for 4 years. And it was an interesting but also terrifying experience. I was not at all prepared for it. And it was much more hostile than I had anticipated, more aggressive and tiring. And so after the term was over, I decided I would not run again, even though people were happy with my work and wanted me to continue, and agreed, said, yeah, we need politicians like him. And I didn't want to continue. And I think, honestly, I suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder after my experience. Democracy, and you know, when we talk about democracy, for me is communication. It's interaction, communication between people, and the less people are interested in it, less interested in actually communicating with each other, the worse it gets. And it also creates a vacuum, because politics and democracy aren't that trendy at the moment, and it creates a kind of a vacuum for opportunists like populist movements to take up space and get some attention. And it's, for me, it's kind of like leaving your house open, and like anyone can come into your house. So it's, and eventually somebody will. And and I think it's very important when we talk about and discuss democracy that the things that are discussed and the things that are done are not always the same. It's two different things. And I like to compare it, democracy, with love. We like to talk about love, and we have songs about love. Love is all you need, and love, love, love. And but doing love is a totally different thing. and making love is absolutely, completely different. And I would say, like, love is not a word. It's not a thought. It's not a feeling, even. Love is first and most action, something that you do. And it doesn't become love until you actually do something. You can tell somebody, I love you, but it's meaningless if you never do anything for that person. Just, I love you, I made a song about you. I love you. And it's meaningless. And make a bet for that person, you know. Get her coffee or something. That's love. So, you know, and it's in a way, our laziness that creates populism. Yeah, I think.
Okay. You can see on that you have an audience here. And for the right reason. We will now move to Senad Čepić. Senad Čepić is an independent politician in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He's the member of the House of Representatives of Bosnia and Herzegovina. He is or was a member of the Party of Democratic Action, but he's on the reformist wing of that party, and he campaigns for more human rights and political reforms in the Bosnian Herzegovinian constitution. Senat, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. First of all, I would like to stress some of issues that you mentioned in your introductory speech, Mihail. Regarding three of your topics or let's say points that you stressed. Usually today conflicts are, in my view, connected to identity crisis. More or less you can see that's that case. Also, when we are talking about globally or locally, it's also very close each other. It's very connected. Everything that's going on everywhere you can see through Facebook, Twitter, or new social media. Everything that's globally, it's at the same time locally as well. And the third issue you mentioned is weaknesses of democratic institutions. I agree with my colleague. He established new political party, as I understood. I also established new political party, which name is not the best political party, but that will be the best political party in my country. I'll do my best to organize and to form my new political party as the best political party in Bosnia. And the main reason that I see in order to answer on that dilemma is also lack of contacts between political elites, political leaders, political parties and ordinary people. And that's very shortly answers on your points, Mihail, that you mentioned. And now, as I am the only one speaker in this Forum 2000 from Western Balkan, I will say something more about my region, about Western Balkan region and my country in general. It's difficult to approach any topic from Bosnia and Herzegovina perspective and have a simple and non-complex explanation. Some people who knows about how it's going on situation in my country, they know what I'm talking about. My country is still on a periphery of globalization. Yes, we have access to Facebook, Twitter, and we do watch the Game of Thrones TV show at the same time as people in New York or Paris or everywhere. But the fact is that my country, as a country and society, is not integrated in the globalized world compared to our neighbors. We are not a member of the EU or NATO, OECD membership or Schengen, and Eurozone memberships are decades away. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, when I talk to citizens or even academics, many would tell me they feel that globalization and capitalism have been bad for their daily lives. As they can watch the Game of Thrones and go on Facebook, their impression does not reflect reality of Bosnia and Herzegovina. They are still isolated from globalization. The case of Bosnia is a good example of how multi-ethnic social structures hamstrung the emerging state in the early 1990s. Shortly after the declaration of independence in 1992, interethnic conflict between ethnic Croats, Bosnian Muslims, and Bosnian Serbs broke out. The Dayton Agreement formally put an end to the violence in 1995, but let's say controlled democracy model, which could best be described as a top-down approach applied by the international community, demonstrates how preconditions such as war and ethnic conflicts were least favorable for transition and consolidation. Current interim state structures of Bosnia and Herzegovina, for instance, demonstrate how international and regional actors affect statehood. Let me give two very short examples. Several months ago, Croatian government increased its prices for all fruit and vegetable products coming from Bosnia and other non-EU Balkan states that transported via Croatia to other EU members. The increase was very high, up to 15 times higher than before. So it de facto blocked our exports for several weeks, and since buyers went to other sources, it de facto destroyed many of our producers. Sputnik, a Russian news outlet active in Belgrade and the Western Balkan, reported about the situation with a narrative of EU and globalization versus poor Balkan producers. The truth was that within days after Croatia's decision, the European Commission got engaged into a matter and managed to persuade Croatian authorities to reverse its decision. The blow to EU's and Croatia's image in the Western Balkan and all of us arguing for integration of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the world was high. Second example is a statement by Czech President Zeman from a couple of weeks ago. He went to media and said that Bosnia and Herzegovina could become a base for ISIS in Europe, as so many Muslims and sympathizers of extreme ideologies live in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The statement went viral within minutes, giving support to all those who make similar claims for years. And then it provoked reactions by all those who felt the need to defend Bosnia and Herzegovina's rather moderate and genuinely European Islam, including me. The truth is, this matter is that European Union in Bosnia and Herzegovina has one of its biggest delegations in the world. It has a military mission, EUFOR, that is capable and does collect data on various security threats. EU also supports security reforms in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The country was among first to introduce punishment for those who go as fighters to foreign countries and has already sentenced several cases. And all serious organizations, NATO, European Union, EUFOR, foreign secret services agree that Bosnia and Herzegovina is not only far from becoming a base for ISIL, but it's doing quite a lot in this area. So how come the president of an EU country can go in public and give such a statement? And how do we prevent from such statements to create negative reactions in the country? By having all of these effective and credible institutions that can counter these false or shallow narratives is the only that can work. Security, but also diplomatic institutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senad, and and maybe I should apologize. I mean, we have our own crackpots in this country, so, you know, okay. Others country do too, so. Liav Orgat is an associate professor at the IDC in Herzliya, Israel, but also teaches at the European University in Florence at the Berlin University. And he specializes in many things: constitutional theory, citizenship theory, global migration, international governance, and political theory. So you can basically choose your topic.
Yeah, well, I almost tempted to talk about love, not in the sense that you mentioned, but also the connection between love of a country, patriotism, and the connection to the identity crisis. But I will not do it now. I want to talk about what I call a global identity crisis. And by focusing on immigration law, immigration policy. And immigration is just a fascinating platform to reflect and to explore national identity. And this is because the requirement we demand them to adapt, to accept in order to join our society, they mirror not only who we are, in many senses think we are, but also what kind of nation we want to be. Now, just 70 years ago, in the post-World War II international systems, Western countries didn't have an immediate need to set boundaries to their identity. National identity was a given, not something that had to be defined. And people had a solid sense, a robust conception of what does it mean to be French, Dutch, Italian, or German. But, and that's the important thing, time have changed for many reasons. Global migration, the rise of multiculturalism, minority rights, globalization forces, specifically in Europe, the establishment of the European Union. And all those factors have led to a reality in which it becomes less clear what does it mean to have a collective identity and how morally justified it to acknowledge it, but also to act upon it. I'll give you two examples, the UK and France. So take the UK. If you ask what is Britishness, there are here British in the audience. So in 2002, Britain has started to a debate over its identity. What does it mean to be British in a global era? And the government established a committee in order to investigate the concept of Britishness. And the same year, the Home Office published its own version of the essence of Britishness. And you take a look for the list. There are 8 values, I think, in the list. And there is nothing particular British there. I mean, that's about welfare democracy, equal protection, freedom of speech, the rule of law. But they are British the same as they are French, Israeli, or American. So a few years after, 2005, the Committee for Racial Equality offered its own version of Britishness and even published a Britishness pie. I could not show you here, but there was a Britishness pie of what are the values, the British values, principles, and institutions. And interestingly, if one looks at the citizenship test, Life in the UK test, which is a test required of migrants, one can easily see that in less than a decade, Britain has changed its concept, or the essence of the concept of Britishness, 3 times. Now take France. In November 2009, back then President Sarkozy launched a national discussion, national debate over the meaning of Frenchness. And I quote, "For you, what does it mean to be French?" he asked the French public. And there was a 3-month debate which yielded a heated discussion over the meaning, the essence of Frenchness. And the more adding things, if you look at the results, so the French didn't do like the Britons. They say, we are not, this is un-French to establish a committee to investigate what is Frenchness, but this was like a TV reality show. They asked the public to define Frenchness. And the more added thing, it shows that when states, nations started to explore the meaning of a collective identity, they very often conclude that there are more sources of national division than social unity. Now, France and Britain are just an example. I think that if you look more on a global perspective, you kind of zoom out from the United States to Australia, from Japan to Germany, we are witnessing a process of kind of nations in search of an identity. Some particular distinguished character, identity that goes beyond global economy and political liberalism. So what is left? What is left of a national identity in the global era? Reviewing national identity debates, especially in Europe, indicate that with very few exceptions, mainly the national language, European states ground their national identity mostly on universal principle, or a local version of universal principle of political liberalism. And it's true, states seek to protect a particular identity, but interestingly enough, they cannot clearly define, specify, what does it mean? And they find out that their sense of identity has become less robust than originally thought. It includes, at best, a local version of political liberalism, but also lots of kind of absurd and funny popular item of the popular culture, like carnivals and festivals and lots of sports, especially in citizenship tests. And I think that this Disneyfication of national identity and the downgrading of national identity to festivals and local social mores, or if you want, the very idea of searching the content of our national identity and attempting to define it, is perhaps the clearest and the biggest indicator of a global national identity crisis. Thank you. Now we can talk about love.
Thank you very much, Liad, and thank you all for your presentations. I think we have a lot of food for thought with respect to all the 3 basic concepts that we've been discussing. Globalization, as Jon said, can be good, bad. There are some bad things about it, good things about it. Populism. I I have to make a personal admission. I stopped using the term because I don't know what it means anymore. I mean, we have 10 days to an election in this country. And if you go out on the street and look at the billboards and the slogans, there's not a single party you could not label as populist, because the promises, the slogans have very little to do with what is going to happen after the election. And one of the easiest definitions of populism is making promises that cannot be implemented or realized. When you spoke, you reminded me, maybe he was one of the godfathers of populism, the former Israeli Prime Minister Levi Eshkol, who was allegedly, a saying is attributed to him, saying, yes, I made a promise, but I never promised to keep the promise. And so that's populism in brief for you. And as for the identity crisis, I'm not sure. I'm a psychologist by profession originally, and identity crisis is when people are not sure of their own identity, when they are losing their identity. And what we've been witnessing the last few years is a kind of, in many places, reassertion of identity. 20 years ago, we all wanted to be Europeans. And never mind whether you were Czech or Slovak or Pole or Hungarian. And these days, there are half of the people in Europe want to be Dutch or Finn or Hungarian or even Catalonians, and so on and so on. So it looks like identity is making a comeback with a vengeance, and we should also be able to account for that. So it's and the European identity we were striving for has sadly, failed to materialize in any tangible respect. I mean, you could quip that the closest we got to a symbol of a European identity is the Eurosong competition, which is a festival of the worst music in the world, and most of it is not even European music, it's originally American pop music brought to its lowest common denominator. So if we are to build a European identity, we have some work to do. Gentlemen? Sure, let's go in the reverse order, yes.
So as a typical Israeli, I'll answer your question by asking you a question about what is left of national identity.
That's what a moderator is supposed to do, right?
So imagine that now you are the minister of whatever, integration, immigration in this country. And then you have to define the 3 top items, only 3, which defines the Czech identity that you would expect the other, the non-Czech like me, to know, to understand, to accept, to be committed to identify with, even to be loyal to, in order to join the society. What would they be? Those kind of questions are very difficult to answer when you look at now European states struggling to define themselves. And it's true, you see kind of re-emergence into identity, and Catalonia, of course, but some other examples. But then there is a question whether it's a real thing or it's kind of the swan song of the old structure of national identity and rediscovering a new version of what does it mean, national identity. And just take a look on the Life in the UK test, all those citizenship tests, the Dutch canon, there is not much there. What you see there is, number 1, local version of liberal values, and number 2, this Disneyfication of identities, that to be German is the beer festival in Munich, or a romantic conception. So sometimes there is a romantic conception of what does it mean to be Dutch or German. So the Germans, a few years ago, they adopted a citizenship test. It was in Hessen. And the questions that they thought the migrant should answer were, they had to cite symphonies of Beethoven and the writing of Goethe and Nietzsche and Schiller, lots of sport. And I think that if you isolate this romantic conception of national identity, not much left there.
Well, if I may try to respond to that, of course, we do share some universal values and very important universal values. I would not argue that for a minute. But the truth is, Leah, that people generally don't wake up thinking about the rule of law or constitutional democracy, etc., etc. They wake up thinking about things that are closer to their day-to-day experience. And if I should try to define the identity of this nation, and at the risk of half of the room disagreeing with me, I would say it's the identity of a small European nation, meaning that it lacks the imperial dimension, it lacks the great power dimension. It's a view from the bottom up. Second, that the history of this nation has started to be rather skeptical of grand concepts and visions like universal progress and end of history and the like. And if we have a new party in this country, it will not be called the best party, as Jons was. It will be called what Hašek called his own party, the party of moderate progress within the limits of the law. That's, and I think that's very close to what you could define as the Czech identity. And if you go to other countries in the region, you would come up with different elements of what makes them different from other European nations. And if you come to Israel, you see the same thing. So the universal dimension is not necessarily at the exclusion of the individual dimension. Jon?
I just wanted to say what I have discovered coming last time I was here in Prague. I was looking for some translations of Hašek's other works than Good Soldier Svag, and I was surprised how little there is. And I went into a bookstore and asked for other works by Hašek, short stories or his biography or something, and in English, and was like, no, I don't have it. And it was like, but there was a whole shelf of Kafka, like anything you wanted to read about Kafka was there, and no Hašek. And I was asking people about it, and they said, yeah, maybe Czechs don't like to portray themselves like Hašek portrayed them, because
we're a little shy on
it's too close to the bone, kind of. But I was thinking in terms of what we have been talking about, globalization and identity, and because of my work, I travel a lot, and I visit many different places, and they're all becoming the same. The center of cities are becoming the same. Prague and Copenhagen are becoming the same because they have the same words and they have the same shops. It's H&M and it's Starbucks and it's and more and more the same. And I was in Tokyo this summer, and it was the same there. It was, I thought it would be more different, but it was, to my surprise, more like the same. And I even saw some Scandinavian shops in downtown Tokyo, and cars are also. I mean, when I was growing up, European cars were. I mean, German cars were certain type. French cars were totally different. They were more streamlined, and then there were American cars, completely different. They were bigger and you could recognize a car, a brand, from seeing it. Now you don't. All cars are becoming the same. They're all the same. Even American cars are the same. They're on different. Chevrolet is becoming like Skoda. It's you have to look at the name brand of it to say, oh, okay, it's a Chevrolet. And like in Iceland, Costco opened a few months ago in Iceland, and before we had local supermarkets who sold very expensive and bad food, but it was local and it was our food, our bad food, and now Costco offers quality food for less price. And of course, people go there, and our local supermarkets are going bankrupt, probably. And it's a good thing, but also a bad thing. Yeah. And I was thinking, what I was thinking, maybe this globalization is affecting political parties. The traditional political parties are all becoming the same, like everything else. There isn't that difference between the left and the right like it was before. It's more or less becoming the same. It's so similar. So, and that's, maybe populism is some sort of, challenge into that.
Right.
Like, and that's also, like, nationalistic values and our identity and stuff like that. That's,
Okay, I want to leave time for the others, but just a quick repartee. It's undoubtedly true what you're saying. I mean, if you come to a capital of any European city and go downtown, the shopping streets look increasingly alike. You have all the same brands, all the same shops, all the same restaurants, etc., etc. But it's also true, the further you go away from the center, if you go to a town in northern Iceland, it would probably look considerably different from a town in southern Bohemia.
Yeah.
And if you look deeper, not in terms of geography and infrastructure, but in terms of spiritual thinking, the average or the good Icelandic novel will still be very different from a good Czech novel or from a good Israeli novel. It's, there is something, and that's my whole point, there is something left of some kind of an identity there. I don't want to push it any further. Senad?
Yeah. I would like to say that it's obvious that we live in uncertain times, and everybody can feel that, let's say, every day. And as you mentioned that many issues has changed in the last 20 years when we are talking about our interest to European Union and opposite. What changed in my view? Because of lack of common results that we could see as a people, as a Europeans, of the European institutions, some leaders, because of that lack of concrete results, instead of discussing and speaking about concrete results, they opened and they started to discuss about some national populism and something like that. But I don't see any, let's say, better approach than to try to be unit, than to try to be together to fight against, let's say, common problems and common challenges that we have. And in order to that, I think the biggest challenge that we have in front of this generation of politicians, and especially new generation of politicians, is to reinforce that kind of, I would say, that kind of interest for having common approach in solving common problems. That's how I see, in general, our future work.
All right.
Okay,
Roberto?
well, I just want to respond very quickly to this issue about what is populism, and I share some guilt here because I introduced the term populism of the center, which I realize is a very contentious term. So I would say populism is defined by anti-establishment and anti-elitist politics, and depending on who the movement, candidate, or party defines as the elite, that tells you what kind of populism you're dealing with, right? So if it's liberal cosmopolitan elites, then clearly we're looking more towards a right-wing form of populism. If it's economic elites, then it's a left-wing form of populism. And if there is something like a populism of the center that is not toxic in the way that the other forms of populism often can be, then it is simply defining the elite as the old party structures, the ossified political systems that need to be renewed so that democracy can breathe life again.
All right. Maybe there are possible alternative terms then for this. You know, we sometimes speak about non-systemic parties or movement. Sometimes we speak about anti-establishment parties and movement. They do describe what you just mentioned. You wanted to have a go,
I
Riyad.
just want a short follow-up. So if we agree, and it seems that at least most of us agree, that there is a process of, if you want, a universalization of national identity, that in some senses we all have become global now, then there is a deep fundamental question here. And this is whether it is legitimate, from a liberal perspective, to protect the very little that is left of national identity. And I've written a book on, which offers a liberal theory of cultural majority rights. And what happened in the last 2 decades is that liberal thinkers and human rights activists focused, law and policy, have focused on minority rights, multiculturalism, which is the right solution for a real problem of needy minorities. But global migration and the numbers and the phase of global migration and the compositions and the outcome and many other reasons and globalization and the European institution, they have all led to a situation in which in some countries, the majority at least has a sense or is feeling also that he is becoming needy. And liberal thinking should give a thought whether there should be a liberal concept of cultural majority right, and what does it mean? And in many senses, what we are seeing now, witnessing now with this majority nationalism in Europe is, and I'm with you, it's moral panic, populism, demographobia, whatever you want to call it. But whatever we think about cultural majority right, from a non-jingoistic perspective, this is a topic that we are likely to hear about in the near future more and more. And my view is that ignoring the fears, whether they are justified or unjustified, but ignoring the fears and the anxieties of majority populations is not only theoretically wrong, but also politically unwise.
I think it's a very good point, and maybe we'll discuss it some further, but I think it's now time to turn to the audience. Please introduce yourselves and yes.
Jolyon Nageli.
Jolyon Nageli.
Former UN mission in Kosovo for many years, and before that I was with Radio Free Europe and VOA. I've recently retired. I found this a very interesting discussion. I would posit a few other things that either weren't said or were said in such a way that there seemed to be a certain gap in memory. What we still have in East Central and Southeastern Europe is a coalescing of national identity in the face of globalization. To say that Czechs look at themselves as a small nation. Well, until 25 years ago, they were part of a much bigger state, a state of two nations, albeit, but a state which, until 1938, was among the 10 most industrialized nations in the world. So to ignore that element of their past when they were someone and now they're just like all of the others, that also is a part of their identity. What's more, it's taken them 25 years since the breakup of the Federation to decide that, well, Czech Republic is sort of a cumbersome sounding name. Let's call ourselves Czechia, which sounds absolutely impossible in English, and I wrote about it 25 years ago, and I still find it unacceptable. The Kosovars, the Albanian citizens of Kosovo, who make up slightly over 90% of the population, have dual identities, much as the Serbs in the Republika Srpska. Today, 3 deputy ministers of the government in Tirana, of the Albanian government, were appointed who are Kosovo Albanians. So there are overlaps, and you find the same, obviously, in Belgrade, not only with the vis-a-vis Republika Srpska, but with Montenegro. And so despite globalization, in areas where national identity still more than a century and a half after it was generally defined, national identity was defined in most of Europe, it still hasn't been finalized in a number of areas. And how do you see that? Where do you see that heading?
Yeah. The lady over there.
Hello. I'm Marianka Vrabcová-Makom. I have the overview of somebody who has got 2 citizenships. I'm Czech, and I'm Canadian too. And I find this discussion very interesting. When I'm in Canada, the identity of Czechs is covered by all of us here being European. Suddenly there is very little from the Canadian perspective. There is not that much difference between Holland and Czechs. We are Europeans. But when I'm here and I'm looking from the point of Central European, both in history, where we had many nations running across what is now Czech Republic, leaving seats and children and so on, all through the history. It's amazing that Czechs have such a strong identity in language, songs, food. When you go to Moravia, such a strong tradition of costumes and connected mostly with religion. So it's an interesting perspective. I like to invite my fellow actor to go past the McDonald's and Starbucks of Prague, go deep, deep, preferably with a Czech person, to find the Czech identity is still very strong. And my question here is, what could be done so that the populists, like some of the leaders right now here in Czech Republic, wouldn't win their votes on being popular wine drinkers and people who talk to folks that can understand them, and so that we can have a little bit more choice. What can be done?
Okay, thank you very much. There's a lady on the right in the back. Yes.
Hello, my name is Maria Sereda. My identity is Russian, and actually I have no idea what to do with it. I would rather give a few comments than questions. One comment is that basically I think there is a conflict between collective national identity and other potential identities. Like whenever your Russianness or Czechness or Swedishness becomes very important, it usually comes in conflict with your values. So I think might be a problem with that. Then second question is, or actually it's a question, don't you think that to some extent the concept of national identity is somewhat obsolete? and maybe the forum of where people get together and discuss what it means to be French is something almost like a forum where people get together and discuss what it means to be a woman or a man. Isn't it something slightly old-fashioned, and aren't we struggling to recover these identities because basically we are lost, not knowing how to live without them, and actually we should live without them because there is not much space to be Russian in this world if you are loyal to bigger values.
Okay, we take one more question here.
Thank you very much. My name is Jacob. I'm from the Czech Republic, and I'm a master's student of politics and sociology in Berlin. I have a very short question addressing Jon. At the beginning of our discussion, you said that it's our laziness that creates populism. And it's a thought that struck me, because I'm really interested, what did you mean by we or our? Because I'm really interested in, I think the society, not even in America or in Europe, is being divided into two groups. That's what I'm thinking. And so I'd say, if it's our laziness that creates populism, did you mean that there is a missing patience from the group of people who are connected with globalization and the people who are being left behind or who are being invisible, as you said in the beginning? So what did you mean by that? Could you broaden your idea? And I'm really interested in this because I'm really I'm trying to think about how to make a bridge between these two groups of people who are being left behind and people who are being globalized, who are connected to globalization. So, if you say is it our responsibility of people who are being globalized to sort of be patient and talk to the people who are not, or what do you mean by the laziness, and who are we? Thank you.
I cannot hear myself, so anyone wants to take a go at it? We will continue with questions. Then, well, I would just make one small terminological maybe point. We've been discussing identity as it is a compact phenomenon. But in reality, I think there are aspects or levels of identity that do not always go hand in hand. I mean, if you speak about political identity, it is undoubtedly true that most people on this continent share the same set of political values that they think are normal and acceptable. If you speak about economic identity, then you will find already divisions between the globalizing strata of the society and the still local strata. And if you speak about cultural identity, it's a completely different picture altogether, because this is something that goes back in time quite a lot with many nations, and that is a part of a legacy that most people, unconsciously or not, are keen to preserve in some ways. So I think when we try to discuss all these things together, we may arrive at contradictions that would not necessarily be there if we discuss them separately. The lady.
Thank you. I'm Norma Hervey. I'm an American historian who's been living and teaching in Prague for the last 10 years. And I have two things I especially like to say. One is that part of the problem we have now is the values that we are looking at internationally are focused on greed, whether it's greed for money or greed for power. And everyone who's left out of that, which is the majority of people, have every reason to feel that they have been misplaced, mistreated, and so forth. The other question I have is, do you think it would be useful if we focused on what it means to be human
instead of what it means to be a particular ethnic identity? Thank you.
Well, I think it's time we recognized a problem, at least the two of us here. I don't know if it's the acoustic in this room or I'm getting deaf, but I find it difficult to understand most of the questions that come from the audience. So if we don't refer exactly back to your point, then my apologies, but there's not much I can do without it. There's a lady who would like to ask a question, and a gentleman. Yes, I'm with Juliet.
Hi everyone, my name is Akhna and I'm from Senegal. I did my undergrad in the US in Boston, and I just finished my master's here in Prague. Well, nationally I am Senegalese, but I consider myself a citizen of the world. So in that view, I would like to ask the whole panel, to which extent can we still talk about national identity, and how should identity be perceived in the world as it is now? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for asking the question in a very intelligible way. I've heard you.
My name is Chaivat. I'm from Thammasat University in Thailand. And in my work, I think it is useful to connect the idea of identity and democracy through another concept, meaning citizenship. By that I mean, when you enter into formal democracy, democratic process, voting, for example, the question you ask is the citizenship of the person. What you have done through citizenship is frozen identity. Because what the chairman has said, I think, is important. That is to say, in all of us here, I am a Thai, I'm also a Muslim, I am also part Indian, so all of that constitute who I am. In that sense, so these are my cultural citizenship that constitute who I am. But when I go to the poll, the question asked is, what is your formal national identity? And that is to say, you then freeze your cultural identity into one, and then you vote. The question becomes, the tension between formal identity and cultural identity, I think, is a mark of the uncertain times of democracy.
Thank you. Now, we have one more question from the floor. Please.
Hello, my name is Miro. I would like to ask you about the direct democracy. I see the parallel. We are talking about the globalized people and the people who are not globalized. And this reminds me the difference between the best universities in Switzerland and the people who are working with cows on their farms in Alps, yeah? And how the Swiss people solve this, that the Switzerland was not divided, or I think because they are discussing together every time, it is maybe hard, and a lot of people who are more globalized, they are afraid of the direct democracy. I understand why, but I would like to hear from you something about this topic. If there is solution in more democracy, I mean the direct democracy. Thank you.
Anyone would like to try with the last one? I was at a conference in Athens 2 weeks ago, and it was held in Athens because the organizers felt that Greece and democracy had something to do with each other, and there was a lot of young speakers there and a lot of talk about direct democracy. And there was a speaker, I think from Denmark, who came up with the idea that what's wrong with politics is not democracy but the politicians. And he argued that there is no inherent link between democracy and elections, and that actually in the old Greek city-states, the magistrates were selected by a lot, by a lottery. So he proposed that we do away with political parties and go back to lotteries as a way to choose our politicians. I'm not sure I would follow him all the way there, but you know, it's one of the ideas.
Yeah, I would like to say about direct democracy that it's a method, but it's not the perfect solution. We tried it in Reykjavik. We came up with a thing called a system called the Better Reykjavik, which was a website and is a website where people can directly come up with ideas and then vote on ideas. And I was especially excited about Better Reykjavik because I saw it as a platform mostly for younger people to get involved. And to my disappointment, the participation rate in it was extremely low. I mean, it was, I think 7% was the highest. And then it just went down to, and I think it's, I don't know what it's now, but probably 3 or 5% or something. Yeah, and I don't know, I'm not familiar with the experience in Switzerland, but from what I understand, participation rate is regularly dropping. So it's, you know.
I want to make 2 points. One is on national identity, the second is on global citizenship. National identity is a follow-up on your point. So we have seen, I guess, the difficulties to define national identity. There are conceptual difficulties, methodological, theoretical, you name it. But imagine that now, congratulations, we have a national identity. What exactly are we supposed to do with that when it comes to migration? And there, in Europe, at least, there are 3 approaches. One is that citizenship is like a bar exam. One can learn to become a citizen. So we just ask the migrant to learn and memorize our histories and languages, our national aspirations, culture, song, food. And then, if he or she is good enough, he can become a citizen. A second approach is that citizenship is not something that you can learn. You have to feel it. You have to have some love of the country. A few years ago, there was a famous quote of the Dutch Minister of Integration. And she said, and I quote, "One cannot study to be Dutch, one has to feel Dutch." And the whole process of naturalization focused on whether one had developed the right feeling and understanding of what does it mean to be Dutch. A third approach is more ethnic or religious. It doesn't exist nowadays in Europe, but it does exist, for instance, in Israel or Japan. That is about ethnicity or religion. One cannot just become a citizen unless you are born as a citizen or you change your primordial characteristics. And EU law, and I think that's a big challenge, that EU law and international law, at least when it comes to the cultural model, is silent. It doesn't say whether culture is legitimate in the process of selecting immigrants. So this is the first point. The second point is about global citizenship. Let me tell you something. After World War II, there was an American peace activist who established a concept of world citizenship and also registry to become a world citizen. It didn't succeed. But nowadays, I think and that's actually the focus of my current project, that the concept of global citizenship can be added not instead of national citizenship, but as a complementary dimension to national citizenship. A recent BBC poll from last year shows that in 20 surveyed countries, 60% of the people, especially the young generation, consider themselves first and foremost as global citizens rather than national citizens. I think that's amazing. And there is a lot of kind of goodwill that we can challenge into a new concept in international law, international relations, of global citizenship. We also have the technology to create such a concept today. And this would be, or can be, a complementary dimension to national citizenship and not instead of, and just a food for thought in the future.
Yeah. Well, maybe for the sake of completeness, there is a false approach to citizenship, which I would call the classicist approach, and that, like in the old Rome, in the ancient Rome, it links citizenship to a set of rights and responsibilities, duties, that make up a citizen, like a duty to serve in the army, the right to vote in the elections, the duty to pay taxes, etc., etc. And we know that Roman citizens were not chosen on an ethnic basis. They were the people who accepted the rights and the responsibilities. And that is increasingly a problem today when many countries, including some EU countries, treat citizenship as a commodity to be sold or marketed, and that makes it increasingly hard to differentiate between the global citizen and the local citizen, because some people have multiple citizenships and the global citizenship or the world citizenship on the top of it. Well, I think deep at heart I'm a classicist, but please.
Yeah, but I will continue where my colleague stopped. I also agree, and I think that national identities will be important, always will be important, but could not be predominant. How I see that, let's say, that approach and that possibility. If common and global institutions will work better and deliver more, in that case, you will have predominant some other identity. And that's the way how I see that we can solve, let's say, this kind of raising nationalism, populism, and something like that. Thank you.
Roberto.
Just a couple of remarks about identity. I think that, if there were a button on this table that I could just push, and it would erase everybody's identity and turn people into cosmopolitan humanitarians, I'd push it straight away. There's no doubt that that is sort of like the ideal form of liberal identification and sense of normative commitment and belief. But human beings are just not hardwired that way. And there will always be identities, and I think that even liberal cosmopolitans who believe themselves to be beyond having an identity often have other identities, right? People have partisan identities. People have identities in terms of an attachment to a city, I think the big problem is not that there are parts of the world where people have really, really strong identities, and that in global cosmopolitan cities people have overcome identity. I think the problem is that there's an inequality in the recognition of identities. I was born in London, I grew up in London. When I switch on the TV, I see a world that perfectly matches the world that I grew up in, prosperous, diverse, multicultural, multi-ethnic. So I feel a sense of recognition. I am recognized, or my identity or pride to be from London or a similar city is recognized when you switch on the TV. But somebody who's living in a city in Eastern Germany or Northern England or the American Midwest feels a sense of exclusion because what they see does not represent the world around them, does not represent their identity. And it is that which creates, I think, this kind of toxic reaction.
Yeah. Václav Havel had a concept, a model of identity that I would call the Onian identity model. He believed that identity is comprised of layers, starting with the personal layer, the family layer, the town and city layer, the country layer, and then the global a level of identity, and that the problem or the task is to reconcile them in harmony rather than put them in conflict against one another. It's a big ask, but ideally that's the way I believe it should be. We have about 5 minutes 5 minutes, so that's the opportunity for the last immortal words by the panelists in the opposite order from what we started. And I then have to make, or try to make, a summary in 3 points of what we were discussing. It will take me about 30 seconds. So, Liad.
So the takeout of, at least in my point of view, is on the empirical level that there is a global migration, global identity crisis, at least Western identity crisis. And then there is a normative question: if we accept this premise, what are we going to do with it? And I try to offer a solution or a way of thought which goes global into the concept of global citizenship as a complementary dimension, but also recognizes the importance of the local, of the particular, by protecting some version of majority culture. This is the concept of cultural majority right.
Jan?
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking a lot about politics and globalization and identity and I think it's most important, and I try to inspire people to find ways to get directly involved in politics, go into politics, join a political party, start your own political party, and I think it's the right thing to do, and I think it's the very, very important thing to do. And especially people who feel that they don't belong in politics and they should not go in politics, they should most definitely go. Academics, scientists, artists, everybody should try to go into politics. That's what I would like to say.
Thank you. Senat.
Yeah, I will conclude by, let's say, agreeing with Václav Havel concept model of identity. I think that we should fight for our values. We can have many identities at the same time, which cannot be confronted, that can be in harmony, and that's that model I also, let's say, that's the model that I see that can work for everyone. I would like to invite you all to think about that and to try to use that as a good model for having better future than we have, let's say, than we have now. Thank you.
And Roberto.
I think I just want to say that, you know, when you're living inside a bubble, it's very difficult to see that you're inside a bubble. And I think that up until 2016, we, and I mean liberal, cosmopolitan elites, have not been aware of the extent to which we have been inside something of a bubble. And now that that bubble has burst, it really falls upon us to reconstruct new inclusive identities that can bring together all citizens into a constructive and non-toxic form of politics.
All right, now the conclusions. If I took an easy way out, so I would make my 3 points. Globalization is complex, identity is complex, and populism is also complex, but I'll try to do a little more at the risk of some people not agreeing with me. The first point would be globalization has its good and bad aspects, but not everything that is wrong with democracy and populism at present can be blamed on it. Second, globalized societies increasingly share common features, but that does not make identity in all its manifestations go away automatically. And third, the various aspects and layers of identity should not stay in the way of shared identity at a supranational or global level. That's it. Okay, thank you very much.